The reading that Team Black is going to be doing is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech on the war in Vietnam. They give the background here on the document that I've provided for you. Nonetheless, um, it is very unlikely that you've read the speech before or have heard of it. And it's mostly because when uh, when teachers teach American history or they teach the history of the civil rights movement, once the passage of the Civil Rights Act takes place, it's almost as if um, historians and public schools and private schools are loth to mention the extensive body of work that Martin Luther King Jr. did after the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. He was a vehement opposition figure to the war in Vietnam, and he had several reasons for doing that. And specifically, disproportionate numbers of poor people were being drafted and sent to Vietnam. They didn't have an out. They couldn't, say that they were enrolled in college because college wasn't available to people of wealth, and so, or in poverty is what I meant to say. So the net result is that a disproportionate number of black and brown people and poor people were sent to fight in the front lines in Vietnam. And in his speech, he lays out um, the reasons for the situation and why he is against the war in Vietnam. It's also pretty clear, too, that, this is in the context of even post civil rights. Even Muhammad Ali had been drafted for no good reason other than Fry for some nefarious reasons to try to draft him as a soldier, which he refused to fight and gave up his world title and stood on his beliefs that he wasn't going to go fight in Vietnam for in a war that he didn't believe in. So in either case, there's a context of civil rights and there's a context of that the Vietnam War was disproportionately fought by poor people and disproportionately by black people sent to those countries to do this dirty work, so to speak. And so that said, as you read it, really pay close attention. Some highlights to kind of look for. I'm going to work my way through. He follows the classical argument style. He has an exordium. He also narrates like where the story of Vietnam as it is. He uses elevated diction, and obviously we talked about using allusions. So this is an allusion to a Langston Hughes poem. Um, there comes a point too. He uses coded words. He's continuing with the narratio of how things are. Um, he also makes claims and provides evidence, and so he has historical evidence, and he points out some of the imagery and things that are going on. Then he eventually reaches what is known as the proposito and the confirmatio. And so he follows that argument pretty well. He uses process analysis as well to break down the five steps of what would be the right thing to do. Um, I'll also say that he uses quoted words effectively. He's highly aware of what is happening around the world, and I, in particular, fell in love with, if you guys go to 161, some of these things. And I encourage you to really read this closely because he basically is holding a door open to America and saying, we can either be a thing oriented society or a person oriented society. And um, I'm just telling you, it's pretty powerful imagery. And I personally speaking, I feel like we chose incorrectly and went with the thing oriented society at this point in time rather than a person oriented. But that's up for your own interpretation. So this takes a while. As you can see, it's many pages long, and it goes on because this speech was deep. It was very deep. This is actually enough reading for what I would consider a few days. And I would consider that as you're reading it, that you mark it up. Notice I marked mine up an awful lot. Um, but what I'm hoping to do is I'll post a discussion thread for this, and and give you an opportunity to take in what you learned. But reading something like this requires a lot of concentration and a lot of time. But it's the very type of reading on the SAT that um, that involves those illusions, the use of logic, religious, and other arguments, knowing history and things like that. It's a seminal argumentative work against the war in Vietnam. So go ahead and give it a read and mark it up, and there will be a discussion thread on this. And good luck.